All right. So thanks again for joining our webinar. Like I mentioned before, my name is Carissa Nelson, project manager at Digital Promise, and our co-host today is Nick Shiner from also from Digital Promise. Sorry. Um,
Okay.
Nick is our project director of Maker Learning at Digital Promise. So we're so excited to have his wonderful expertise on our webinar today.
Really thankful to be here, excited to share and answer any questions folks have and really support folks as they're really, wow, I can't believe getting ready to wrap up their Ciena Solutions Challenge submissions, which is bonkers to me. So thank you for those of you who are in attendance. If you're viewing online later as well, thank you for checking this out. We really hope we'll find the content to be incredibly helpful for you.
Awesome. All right. So if you are new to hearing about the Ciena Solutions Challenge, it is a global design challenge that invites students and teachers to design solutions to real world problems or issues and to take action to build a better world around them. And so, a little bit about Ciena. Ciena is a networking systems, services, and software company who has a digital inclusion program which aims to mobilize the company's global workforce, leverage its innovation leadership, and collaborate with customers, suppliers, and other partners to bridge the digital divide. And Ciena has committed to fund $10 million USD over a 5-year period on programming that promotes digital inclusion through greater connectivity and access to technology and digital skilling, with a goal of expanding opportunities for 100,000 underserved students in our global communities. And the Ciena Solutions Challenge does just that. It, like I mentioned before, we're inviting students and educators to design solutions to problems that you care about and problems that you're really passionate about. And through the Ciena Solutions Challenge, students are encouraged to use the challenge-based framework, which really encourages educators and students to think big, ask thoughtful questions, and develop meaningful and actionable solutions. And a little bit about the challenge and how you're able to participate. We are inviting in-school and out-of-school educators and teachers from anywhere around the world. So you can be affiliated with a public school, a private school, registered homeschool, or a legally recognized educational organization like a museum or an after-school program or a youth agency. And again, this program specifically is tailored for middle and high school students. So the ages are between 11 years old to 19 years old. And your students are encouraged to leverage digital tools and technologies in their actions and solutions. So this can look like creating a product or a device, a campaign or a piece of media, a physical or a digital environment, an experience or system, or something else that we have never heard of before. You can surprise us. And so all submitted projects will be considered for inclusion in the Ciena Solutions Challenge Showcase Online Gallery. And then as a part of the Ciena Solutions Challenge Awards program, eligible educators can apply for a 2,500 USD Sustainability Award for projects that you wish to sustain and scale. So we're really excited about this webinar today because you'll be learning a little bit more about, how to sustain and scale your ideas and your wonderful projects. And, we'll kind of go into that in a bit. And the deadline to submit a project is on January 10th, 2022. So it's coming up. Make sure that you're registered at cienachallenge.org to participate and to submit your project. And we have a great kind of tool right now that we're running. If you need feedback on your project or would like feedback on your project before submitting on January 10th, you can share your projects with our team for feedback until December 10th. So that's just in a few days. And there are more details on the Ciena Challenge submission feedback worksheet, which I'm going to share the link to this feedback worksheet in the chat box. And if you just have any questions about your project or want some ideas about what you're submitting, you are more than welcome to reach out to us using this feedback worksheet, or you can email siennachallenge@digitalpromise.org. Or if you have my email address, you can also email me at kbowen@digitalpromise.org. So that's an opportunity for you all to take advantage of for the next few days. And if we have any questions about the project, you're welcome to add them to the chat box. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pause before I even start looking at the outcomes that I have listed, because I think the most important thing for us to do here for folks who are in attendance is, if you have questions specifically about your project and your context, and you're curious about how you can sustain and scale your project, I'm going to give you a moment. If you'd like to ask that in the chat or come off of mute and ask your question, we'd love to be able to help provide that support directly here before I start talking about some of the broader things that you can do as an educator or an administrator looking to help folks sustain and scale their programs and projects. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'll wait a minute or so. And if not, then we can get started with the regularly scheduled programming. So I'll give folks a moment. If they're typing in the chat, that's great. Well, and I will certainly answer anything that pops in there for you. But my outcomes for today, what I'd love to be able to cover with folks who are viewing this content, is that participants are going to understand how to sustain and scale their challenge projects by envisioning a culturally relevant maker learning program. So I'm going to be using the framing of making or maker learning, this idea of kids building things that are important to them and can enact change in their world. So, envisioning a culturally relevant maker learning program, determining a vision for a maker learning program that's meaningful and inclusive, and describing the experience of a learner engaged in a maker learning program that embodies that program's vision. And the reason we talk about these particular bullet points and these things that I've mentioned in this on this slide is because, in order to scale or sustain a program or a project, you need to have the appropriate supports around what you want to do with your learners. Without those appropriate supports, the reason why it's so difficult to often do these things in a schooling environment is because the supports around it aren't what they need to be. The learning environment isn't what it needs to be fully in order to be able to create these experiences and make sure that you have the opportunity to keep coming back to them, that your learners have the opportunity to iterate on the experience, to work on things that are important to them, to shift what direction they're going to go in. So we'll be covering all of these things in a much broader framing, but please, as we're talking about these things, make sure that you're thinking about them in the specific context of the organization with which you work, and how you could potentially use some of these tools that I referenced today to help make some of those broader changes, which in turn help to make you more able to sustain and scale the programs and the projects that you have ongoing through the Ciena Solutions Challenge. The first document I'm going to show you, and I'm going to bring up a larger version of this in just a moment. Everything that we're covering today, you can access from the Digital Promise Maker Learning Leadership Framework. We'll make sure that we send out a link to that resource that we have on the Digital Promise website. You can see it right here. This is a completely open and free resource that we have for folks who are looking to build and sustain maker learning programs in their school system, in their after school program, or in their community. So we'll be talking a lot about, again, the broader implications that you'll need to address in order to make sure that your projects are sustainable and scalable after the fact. And we can certainly talk, when I finish going through these few resources, about specific projects as well. As more folks are joining us, I'll make sure that we have time for plenty of questions as well for the specific projects that you're. All of the resources that we'll be talking through today are under our Establishing Your Vision section. And this is the one that I had before, envisioning a culturally relevant maker learning program. So what we encourage folks to do is really take the opportunity to look three different ways as they're thinking through what they want to do with making and creating, especially with this idea of creating things that are going to have a local positive impact for their community. We first ask folks to look outward, thinking about building on the unique context of a local community and how that local community interacts with the educational organization and what that relationship back and forth looks like, because that is really at the crux of what makes making so impactful and can actually take your Ciena Solutions challenges to the next level and help you to sustain and scale them. So thinking about things like who in our local community designs and creates or fixes things as part of their profession. What are the professional creative outlets? What are the professional constructional outlets? What are the who are the makers who are making as part of their day-to-day career? Who are the makers who are making as part of their hobby? The garage tinkerers, the casual artists, the ones selling, maybe not necessarily opening an art gallery, but selling at local farmers markets and out in the community, who are somewhat professional but also a hobbyist as well, and also thinking about family members and other community members who like to create things and tinker and explore what it means to make something that can have an impact. And then last but certainly not least, this idea of cultural tradition. We know that making is really at the core of the human experience. When we look at our community and the communities that we serve, where does making show up as a cultural tradition? And how can we tie our Ciena Solutions challenges, our other maker activities that we do, those hands-on design oriented, how do we do them in a way that we're also tying in cultural traditions as well? And not all of those will be applicable at all times, but taking the time to envision who these folks are and how they're making in the community and how that shows up in the community is a great way for you to figure out who you can tap to help contribute to the work that you're doing and who your students can also reach out to contribute to what they're working on as well. The next question is, in what events and spaces can we connect with these people? So I mentioned some of those things before. Going out to museums and libraries and community centers, corporations and small businesses in the community. How do you tap into them and say, we need help, we're working on this particular project, how could you help us take this to the next level? So a combination of asking your students, how do you want to scale this? How do you want to make sure that you're able to keep working on this and then taking it even further? Who can help us with that? Where can we contact them to make sure that they can help us with what it is that we want to accomplish through our work? How might these people inspire and or participate in our Maker Learning program as role models and mentors? So once we figured out where to reach them, how might they help us? Is it that inspiration? Are they serving as a model? Maybe they're doing something that's comparable to what your students are doing. Can they actually collaborate with them and provide can they actually provide, Chris, is that better? Okay, cool. How can they actually provide actual like, is there a feedback loop that they could be involved in? Is there an opportunity for them to lend some of their tools and expertise to what you're working on? It's a really great way to bring other folks in to help support the work that you have going on. And then how might these local practices inform our Maker Learning program? So all of those things, how do they serve the broader work that you want to do around students designing and creating solutions for the community? Remember, this can absolutely serve your Ciena Solutions Challenge work, and it should. But there's also this opportunity to create a broader programmatic structure that your Ciena Solutions Challenge work can fall under, and that benefits your broader instructional goals as well. Getting kids more involved in the work they're doing, giving them more agency in the work that they're doing, getting them out into the community, hearing some of the students, hearing from some of the teachers who have been doing this work, and work I've done in the past around Maker Learning, seeing students making phone calls to corporations about migrant workers who are part of the journey of food from the farm to our tables, and having them advocate for better working conditions for migrant workers. When have you ever heard students getting the opportunity to do that? What a great opportunity to create these conditions both for the Ciena Solutions Challenge, but also for the broader work you do in your school or your out of school time programming. The next part is looking inward. So we've looked outward at the community. We know we want to bring the community into the school. Looking inward at our practices in the school and the conditions in our school to help make sure that we have what we need. So the first one being, how is creativity a part of everyday life for students? Where does that show up? In what classes does it show up? In what classes does it not show up? How often do they get the opportunity to be creative, to design things, to analyze what they need to do, and actually work on something authentic? Those are questions we should be asking ourselves constantly, because if we're not, then we're probably not providing enough of that opportunity. This next bullet point is one that is my favorite one to ask because I don't think it gets asked enough. In what ways are students currently encouraged or prohibited from engaging in creative practices? Part of the sustaining and scaling, particularly if you've been working with students that don't always get these opportunities. Why are they not always getting these opportunities? We know that hands-on design-oriented experiences are typically reserved for kids who are already achieving really well, and they're getting the time to be creative after the fact. After the fact that they finished the work that they were assigned to do. So it's an add-on, it's an extra rather than part of the curriculum that they are teaching. So how do we look at that and ask that next question? Is creative space a reward for some or an opportunity for all? Whether you're doing this in a classroom or a library or in a maker space, are only some kids getting the opportunity to do that? What groups of students are being prohibited from it? Is there a racial breakdown that only white male students are getting the opportunity to do this? Looking at those practices is really critical because that then feeds into how you can sustain and scale a project. If all of your kids aren't getting the opportunity to do that creative work, then sustaining and scaling your project is going to be incredibly difficult because there's not a structure in place that says every learner who got to participate in the Ciena Solutions Challenge will get to continue working on this. So really critical to be thinking about that as well. And then how does our school embrace, or our organization embrace, multiple ways of knowing and understanding? A really wonderful way to sustain and scale these projects is to think about how you can continue to integrate them in everything you need to do with your learners. So thinking about your assessments, thinking about how you teach other content in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish that you've been assigned as an educator to do, how do you provide different opportunities to maybe allow them to continue working on their Ciena Solutions Challenge in a way that still meets continued need for other skills and standards that need to be taught. So I always like to say, if I don't need to grade an essay, if I'm not grading your writing, then I shouldn't necessarily have to assign an essay. I should be able to assign something that allows them to demonstrate their understanding and the skills that they've acquired in a way that's meaningful to them. So having them continue work on their solutions challenge is a really great way to do that. And then again, moving forward, thinking about continued sustenance and scaling of your projects, looking forward, envisioning characteristics of an equitable maker learning program. So what indicators will let us know when students begin to feel a sense of belonging and ownership? We know that the Ciena Solutions Challenge provides that opportunity. Kids identify what they want to work on, they want to learn more about, they have to engage, we engage them, they investigate the concepts and the ideas behind the problem that they're trying to solve, and they choose how they are going to act upon it. What are those indicators? I'm sorry, I don't have that. Maybe message Carissa privately to ask for that. So we want to make sure that they have this sense of belonging and ownership. The next is that who might feel most vulnerable in our Maker Learning program and how will we support them? So once folks are involved in this program, once folks are working on a solutions challenge, we want to make sure that kids feel comfortable in that. And there are a lot of different factors that come into that. One of the most common things I hear, both about Maker Learning and specifically about the Ciena Solutions Challenge, is this idea that kids start working on it and the teacher says, go, the educator says, go, and then it's crickets. They hear nothing because the learners aren't used to hearing that. We actually know a lot of high-achieving students in particular have a lot of trouble with the open-ended nature of challenge-based learning and doing something like the Ciena Solutions Challenge because they're so used to having to do what the teacher tells them to do. It's more compliance-based than creative-based. So what does that look like, and who feels vulnerable? And then on the other side, learners who never get access to these types of experiences based on the other reasons that we mentioned in the last column, how do we make sure that they feel comfortable and we support them with this type of work? And then again, also, what biased patterns of participation? Do all of your Ciena Solutions Challenge learners, do they all come from the same background? Do they all look the same? Are their family makeups the same? Are you seeing that only specific learners are getting the opportunity to engage in this? That's a great place to identify that and figure out how you're going to create targeted supports and outreach programs to make sure that more learners have the opportunity to engage in challenge-based learning, maker learning, and eventually potentially submit for the Ciena Solutions Challenge. And then how might we support all students in ways that deepen relationships and cultivate agency? This idea that we want to make sure that every student that you work with has that opportunity to work with others, both in the school, both in the school and outside of the school, working with the community as well. I want to pause there for a second. Do we have any questions specifically around what it means to envision a culturally relevant maker learning program? My background's in fourth and fifth grade. I made it further in fourth and fifth grade. Teaching fourth and fifth grade. Okay. So the next resource I'd like to show you is, so once you've done some of this work of thinking about what a culturally relevant maker learning program would look like and how that can support your Ciena Solutions Challenge, scaling and supporting and sustaining them, this is a really wonderful resource from Maker Ed, one of our partner organizations. And what I love about this one is you take the ideas that you come up with in envisioning a culturally relevant maker learning program, and now it's time to start thinking about exactly what your values are in this work and where does it show up for your learners, where does it show up for you and for the community as well. So thinking about, if we want to sustain and scale these programs, why? We care about making and maker center learning because why? And there's all of these different opportunities to look at these statements and identify the ones that you identify with most strongly, and also provide this to your learners and your community members that are really involved with your educational program, and say, what are the things that on here that stand out to you? Once you identify 3 of these, the great thing that you can do is you flip it over like this, and you map them to these different ideas, these different framings for why you are doing this work of hands-on design-oriented learning. Did you take a social justice and equity approach? Is this more about workforce development? Yes, like you've done the Ciena Solutions Challenge, you're trying to make change in your local community, but you are maybe also trying to help develop some real skills for the workforce that kids can then take forward K through 20 and then even beyond. Skill development. Is this about learning to code or graphic design or 3D printing and 3D design? Was it strictly about learning skill development? Or was it about the learning experience? Was it about doing research and learning more about a specific idea or concept? None of these is more important than the others, and you can certainly end up with an answer that is some combination of these, but ultimately helping yourself better understand this and how you feel about it, and most importantly, how your learners feel about the answers to this, is a really great way to help make sure you understand what your program is going to be and how the Ciena Solutions Challenge will continue to factor into that particular work. I'm going to skip over the vision statement tool because we actually need to flip the order of these, because the next part is really an opportunity, again, for you to work alongside your learners to think about what does the continued work on the Ciena Solutions Challenge look like, and what does it look like sustaining it, and what does it look like to grow it. So this learner journey worksheet is a really great way to think about all of the different ways that the learner's journey can activate your senses, and you would see that you are seeing what you want to be happening, and that what your students want to be happening is happening as well. So once you had the opportunity to think through a culturally relevant program, figuring out what your values are, what does that look like for your learner, for your learners, for the typical learner, for the atypical learner, a learner in your class? What does this look like? What does it describe what you hope learners will be talking about as they are in this program from the beginning. So if you were to think back before your students started the Ciena Solutions Challenge, what are some of the things that they would say? What are the things that they would do? How do they feel about the schooling program, the schooling that they're getting? What do they know? Then after the first session, what do you think you're going to hear them doing? What did you hear them doing? What did you see them doing? How did they feel? Like, did you have any memories of how they felt as they were doing this? What do they know after it? And then what about the halfway point? And then starting to think about where you are now in this, like thinking about what does this look like moving forward. Now that as they're moving towards the end of this process, thinking about submission of their Ciena Solutions Challenge, what are they saying? What are they doing? How are they feeling? What do they know? What are all the things that they've learned throughout this? And then this last column is really where you have the opportunity to think about, where does this go from here? Okay, we've done this for the last few months now. What does this look like after a year of doing this? What does it look? What are our learners doing? How are they engaging with school and making? What are they doing? How are they feeling? What are they saying about the work they're doing? What do they know? What are all the skills they've gathered? What are all the things that they're able to do now? And then from there, what you can do is, and this might take a little bit to load, this is a bigger PDF, then you can start visioning out exactly what your continued work looks like, what your potential broader program could actually be. This is where you can actually say things like, we believe in these values. This is our philosophy. This is based on our strengths and our areas of expertise. We're aiming to accomplish these goals, and this is how we want to accomplish it. This is for whom we are working. This is the audience. This is who we serve. That's more than just saying students in the community. You want to be more specific than that with who your stakeholders are, because we know this is important, because we've observed these things, and we know that we'll have been successful when these metrics are met, when these indicators become evident in this work. And there's a really great tool here that you can use for this as well that really helps you put these things together and identify them. So with these broad steps that you take, these are the things that you can use to help make sure that your project is more successful. So this is bigger work. Like, I'm not saying that I haven't addressed some really big things that require shifts in this work, but those things in turn help make sure that the work you're doing around the Ciena Solutions Challenge and helping your learners continue to sustain what they're working on and actually grow it beyond what they're working on. The best way to do it is that you've helped them grow it so much that they're working on it outside of school on their own, because it's become a true passion project for them. It's something that they want to work on constantly because it's something that is really meaningful to them. So these are some of the steps that really come into play, and I'm certainly happy to ask any questions you might have about these specific resources or specific projects that you're working on that you're really struggling to think about how you could potentially help your learners to continue working on them based on the potential roadblocks to continuing this work. We can definitely open it up for any questions or comments about this work and more.
Thank you so much, Nick. This is really great information, and I have a very small question
Yeah,
around the learner journeys document that you
sure.
shared. I think this is a great reflective piece that many people can use. I mean, even like beyond the challenge. Where have you found? How have you found, I guess, students being able to like find some agency in this type of document? Is it mainly for educators, or would it be for students as well, if they're maybe
Sure.
working in smaller groups? I'm just wondering how this can be applied for a
That's a great
student.
question. It's an absolutely fantastic question. So if I remember correctly, so this is from Autodesk, who is that's the organization that developed Tinkercad and a bunch of the other 3D modeling and CAD software that's out there. My guess is this was probably originally, the spirit of it was for teachers to figure that out. But to your point, Carissa, I think that this is you could use it as a collaborative document where you're actually doing this and co-creating what your ideal program looks like, what your learner journey looks like alongside your learners. You could also start separately. You could have the teachers fill out what theirs is and the learners figure out what theirs is, and then come together and see where do they align? Where are they different? Provide opportunity for each side to, I say side because they're in different roles, for each role to share why those things were important to them, why those things were things that they would want learners to see or to say or to do. So I think that you can certainly get creative with how you use any of these. I think the more co-creation and co-design of a makerspace, of a program, of the Ciena Solutions Design Challenge, like these things, the more you work alongside youth, the better your work will be, the better their work will be, because to your point, Carissa, their agency is just magnified because you're entrusting them to say, like, I want to co-create this with you. I want you invested in your learning experience. I want you to be a part of what we're doing. It's important to me that you find value in this and that you're seeing the things out of this that you want to see. And there's a negotiation process there, right? Like part of it, like there are still rules and structures in place that need to be followed, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least be hearing what our learners are saying and what our teachers need. Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. And so one thing I can also show folks while we're here, so if this is something that you're interested in doing more with your learner and starting to think about what this can look like from a broader perspective in a learning organization, our Maker Learning Leadership Framework really is designed to help you see right here, sustainable, equitable, and powerful maker learning. That's the goal of what we do. So the next resource that I would encourage folks to check out is this Maker Learning Maturity Matrix. This is something that we've developed where you can really take a look at your educational program and see what's already in place and what areas in which you can grow are. So it's broken out into building support systems. So is your administration supporting this type of work? If your administration was really excited about you doing the Ciena Solutions Challenge, they're probably up here somewhere where they're really encouraging you to think about how your learners can get more involved in the learning process and also doing more hands-on design-oriented learning. How do you get your other teachers excited about this and getting them to do some of this work as well? So part of sustaining this might be figuring out little blocks of time across different classes or across different organizations even where this work can be happening. And that feeds right into the community part as well. If you've got strong relationships with the community, maybe they can start working on it in school and then pick it up in their after school club. Maybe a lot of kids stay after school for an after school program because their adults are working. Can they continue working on it in that after school club? Also teaching and learning. What are the pedagogies and practices of the educators in the building? Do they align with this type of work? And how can you find more support for this work amongst them? What does it look like to integrate this into your curriculum? So for many of you, the Ciena Solutions Challenge may have been an extra thing that you did or that you're working on. How can you find better ways to integrate this type of learning experience and the Ciena Solutions Challenge into what you work on? Is there a unit of study that makes a lot of sense? Is there a way for them to work on particular parts of the Ciena Solutions Challenge across content areas or across organizations? And then what does it look like to assess this? So you've done the Ciena Solutions Challenge. We know that there's an assessment component for being evaluated for the Sustainability Award, but assessing the work in school or in your after-school program is really important too. What does it look like to make to assess and also assess the things that are being made? And then last but certainly not least is this idea of acquisition and allocation. Is there budget for this? Like, making doesn't have to be this really technologically advanced thing. Making is at the core of the human experience. So we know we've been making far before the invention of gigabit internet and 3D printers. But if you want some of those things to help build the program to give kids access to some of those tools and technologies, how do you allocate budget? How do you raise money for this? How do you find funding for that? That's a really great way to help make sure that you've got dollars behind or money behind what that experience looks like. Do you have space for it? Whether it's a dedicated cart that rolls around, a part of a classroom or a room or an actual like big maker space, what does the space look like and how have you designed it to create the opportunity for learners to come in and build the things that they believe are important or that they have agency in? And then also the idea of what tools and materials do you have available? How do you want to scale that over time? You have maybe some low tech things now. What is the next thing that you think you would benefit your learners, and how do you go about finding the space for them and the finances for them to be able to make sure you can actualize that? And then one of the really great things is we have a dedicated section in this framework for each of those things. So, for example, if you want to build if you want to look at curricular integration, for example, I can click here and you can see that we have a number of resources around that. So understanding by design is a really great way to backwards map what your curriculum can look like, keeping your learning outcomes at the beginning and designing the learning experience, including the hands-on design experiences, making sure that they meet the needs of those end learning outcomes. Then we also have some case studies like this one from Middletown City School District, and then some ideas for before, during, and after a maker learning project. So how could you plan to do this again? How could you design and facilitate it? And then what does reflection look like? I also know there's a lot of really great resources within the Ciena Solutions Challenge resource library that you can tap into as well. So this is a really robust resource that we continue to update, usually about every year or every other year, although we do consistently add resources in between. We're going to have a new refresh of this resource in Q1 of 2022, focused on equity, accessibility, and inclusion, particularly around learners with disabilities as well. So it's a really great resource that you can use to help build your case of support, integrate this within your teaching and learning, and acquire and allocate the things that you need to help make sure that you're able to sustain and scale the projects that you've been working on.
This is so awesome. Thank you so much, Nick,
Yeah, of course.
for all of this information. I'm really I'm putting a lot of emphasis on folks who are on the call and maybe some that are listening or watching this recording to really take a look at this at the Maker Learning resources, because if you are interested in, submitting a project for the to be considered for a sustainability award, I think it's a great way to, just kind of be reflective about what your projects are. I'm going to go ahead and add the detailed submission form to the chat box. And if you're able to take a look at it now, that's great. And if you're not, that's okay. We'll send it in a follow-up email. But most of the information that Nick shared in the slide deck are just like great things to take a look at before, you're ready to go ahead and submit the form. Thanks for sharing that, Nick.
Absolutely.
And if you take a look, at each of the questions, this is not how you'll actually submit your projects. You'll submit your projects on the cienachallenge.org website, but this is just something that you can download, a document that you can download to review on your own, or you can share it with your students. This might give you all a good opportunity to take a look at what it is that you'll be evaluated on or your projects will be assessed on. And it gives you a really good detail information on the rubric and how much percentages are. And, a lot of what Nick shared, especially on the Maker Learning, sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but it had all those different boxes on there. So there was something about budgets and allocation. Yeah, acquisition and allocation. I think that's a great kind of way to take a look at, what you should be considering when you're thinking about sustaining and scaling, and what you might want to consider including to make for your to build up your case for your sustainability award when submitting your projects. And so I just want to emphasize to use the resources and take a look at it, and definitely download this submission form for yourself, for your students, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to use the chat box, or you can email us at sienachallenge@digitalpromise.org. Before we end today, I want to just again thank you so much, Nick, for sharing all of this great information. I do want to remind you all that we have our next and final webinar for our Ciena Solutions Challenge, which is really just going to be an opportunity for you to learn how to submit your project on January 5th, 20, that should say 2022, on January 5th, 2022 at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So you will get an email about that. Thanks, Nick. You'll get an email about that in a few weeks, but I just wanted to go ahead and give you all a heads up on what we have coming up next. And if you have any other questions, again, we can open up this time for you all to ask your questions in the chat box, or you can come off mute. And in the meantime, thank you for attending. So I'll stay on for a couple minutes and really appreciate you all for joining today.
Yeah, thank you all. And Carissa, thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of these resources and just support educators out here doing fantastic work with their kids.
Absolutely.